People often imagine power as something loud, visible, and surrounded by attention. They think influence grows where crowds gather, and approval flows easily. But Machiavelli understood something deeply uncomfortable about human systems. Real power rarely begins in the spotlight. It begins quietly in distance, where observation replaces participation. Before someone truly understands how the world operates, they are often pushed to its edges. This exclusion is rarely dramatic or openly hostile. It usually happens subtly, through silence, neglect, or quiet removal. Inclusion trains obedience without force. Exclusion creates awareness without permission. When you are included, you are managed more than you realize. Expectations slowly shape your behavior while you believe you are acting freely. You absorb rules without questioning them. You mirror emotional responses to stay accepted. Over time, belonging replaces independent judgment. Isolation breaks this spell by interrupting emotional feedback loops. When you are alone, you stop reacting to the group's moods and expectations. The noise fades enough for patterns to appear. You begin to notice who speaks confidently without substance. You see who follows without thinking and who fears silence more than truth. This is why isolation often arrives before strength. Not because the world is cruel, but because clarity requires space. Space cannot exist where constant validation dominates perception. Machiavelli believed observation without participation was essential. You cannot see the game clearly while desperate to belong to it. Distance creates perspective, and perspective threatens systems built on obedience. When someone begins to think independently, they rarely face open attack. Instead, they are quietly excluded or gently sidelined. Their absence is made to seem accidental. This protects the structure from scrutiny. Silence is safer than confrontation. Most people panic when isolation begins. They mistake separation for rejection. They assume something is wrong with them socially or emotionally. Their first instinct is to fix it quickly. Machiavelli would question that instinct. What if this distance is removing noise rather than value? What if absence is giving you access to uninterrupted awareness? Power does not come from being liked. It comes from understanding leverage, timing, and human weakness. These lessons cannot be learned in crowds. They are learned in silence. Isolation becomes the first real test of strength. Can you exist without applause or reassurance? Can you sit with uncertainty without running back to familiarity? Those who fail this test return to dependency. Those who endure it begin developing authority over themselves. Self-authority becomes the foundation of all other power. Being alone forces a confrontation most people avoid their entire lives. You realize no one is coming to rescue you. At first this feels terrifying, then it feels humiliating. Eventually it feels liberating. Machiavelli understood that those who cannot govern themselves will always be governed by others. Solitude strips away borrowed identities and social masks. You can no longer hide behind roles or relationships. What remains is your raw decision-making. Discipline and tolerance for discomfort become visible. This is where authority is actually formed, not through affirmations or motivation, but through endurance when no one is watching. You discover whether your habits collapse into distraction or sharpen into focus. You learn whether you wait to be chosen or begin choosing yourself. Most people confuse confidence with loudness. Machiavelli knew real authority is quiet. It does not beg to be seen. It does not explain itself constantly. Solitude teaches this by force. Performance becomes meaningless without an audience.
How emotional detachment
Begins to develop during isolation. Not as coldness, but as freedom. Validation stops being currency. Approval loses its ability to control your behavior. Reactions slow down. Decisions become deliberate. When you no longer depend on validation, you become harder to manipulate. You tolerate uncertainty without panic. You stop chasing immediate relief. This changes how others experience you. You become less predictable and less desperate. Unattached people listen differently. They hear what is said beneath the words. They notice inconsistencies and hidden motives. Machiavelli believed emotional independence sharpened perception. When you need nothing, you finally see clearly. Clarity replaces illusion. Society is uncomfortable with people who stand alone. They disrupt emotional expectations. They do not rush, over-explain, or react on cue. This discomfort often turns into labeling. Alone, people are called arrogant, cold, or strange. Machiavelli would recognize this as projection. When people cannot read you, they fill silence with assumptions. Distance creates space for truth to surface. Truth makes people nervous. Silence becomes threatening. Modern culture equates visibility with value. If you are not constantly present, you are assumed to be falling behind. When someone steps outside the group rewrites their story. They must be weak or bitter. This protects the group's structure. Being underestimated is not always a disadvantage. Machiavelli understood this deeply. When people believe you are inactive, they stop watching. When they assume disconnection, they reveal more. Invisibility becomes protection. Solitude gives you time to rebuild without interference. It allows understanding to grow without commentary. Many people sabotage this phase by trying to prove relevance. They announce growth before it has roots. Silence would serve them better. However, solitude is not automatically virtuous. Machiavelli warned that withdrawal without purpose leads to decay. Isolation can become avoidance. Reflection can become rumination. Distance can turn into bitterness. The line between preparation and stagnation is intention. Solitude should expand awareness, not shrink it. If your world is getting smaller, something is wrong. If your thinking is sharpening, something is working. Purpose determines the outcome. Machiavelli believed timing was everything. Know when to withdraw, know when to return. Solitude is a season, not a destination. It is for recalibration, not disappearance. Eventually, strength must re-enter the world, not loudly or dramatically, but deliberately and precisely. Action becomes selective. Speech becomes intentional. Engagement becomes strategic. If you are alone right now, the question is not why. The question is how you are using it. Are you preparing or disappearing? Are you observing or avoiding? Isolation shapes you either way. The mind does not remain neutral in solitude. Sharpens or dulls. Intention decides which. Used correctly, solitude becomes a training ground. Patience replaces urgency. You learn to sit with unanswered questions. Emotional reactions lose their grip. You move when it is effective. You speak when it matters. Restraint replaces impulse. What you build here is invisible but decisive. Emotional regulation forms quietly. Strategic patience develops privately. Clear perception sharpens slowly. These cannot be taught socially. When you return to the world, people may not understand what changed. They will only feel it. You listen more than you speak. You choose carefully. Distractions lose their pull. This is not superiority. It is alignment. Not detachment from people, but detachment from illusion. You no longer seek approval to stabilize yourself. Stability comes from within. If you are alone right now, do not rush to label it. Do not romanticize it, and do not waste it. This phase is demanding, but honest. Machiavelli believed honesty was rare and powerful. This moment is transitional. Old structures no longer fit. New ones are not yet visible. That discomfort is meaningful. Solitude removes borrowed confidence and borrowed fear. What remains is quieter, but real. Reality feels heavy before it feels solid. Direction begins here. Clarity replaces desperation. This is not the end of connection. It is the end of unconscious attachment. When you return, you will choose alignment over approval. Manipulation will stand out clearly. Preparation feels like delay when purpose is unseen. Growth is quiet before visible. Strength is internal before recognized. Positioning happens in silence before action. This phase exists for a reason. Sometimes solitude is not a setback. It is the final distance required. Distance before precision. Silence before authority. Separation before clarity. And clarity before power.